usual podcast, we're still on YouTube, and everything's god awful. Like we have great conversations, but it's just our Wi-Fi is just horrific. So who knows? Maybe that'll be the same for me. So.
Okay, I'm going to bring us live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And everybody, this is Point to the Spot, a US-based podcast focused on the world of football. This is Andrew Ball, and I will be your host this evening. Not Jack Kelly. We've moved on from Jack, and you're stuck with me. And I'm happy to introduce a very special episode of the podcast. Coming back live from San Diego, California, Mr. Cesar Hernandez. You will see his byline at ESPN FC 442, and you will hear his voice on the Mexican Soccer Show podcast. He's been a very busy man, and we are very happy to have him back on the air. Friend of the pod, Cesar Hernandez. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Sometimes my schedule's a little chaotic. Sometimes it's a little much, but I'm glad to be back. Glad to be talking about Mexican soccer. It's always a thrill to be talking about not only just the Liga MX, but also the Mexican national team as well.
Indeed. And we have a variety of subjects related to Mexican soccer, including El Tri, that we will be discussing this evening. But first, has wrapped up, and I'm excited that I finally am able to pronounce Clausura correctly.
Boom. Perfect. There we go. It's like I'm back at Tijuana. I would have never guessed I'm not in Tijuana anymore.
I'm flattered. Us hosting the trophy, and I will start by throwing it over to Reed, who I know has some Clausura related questions ready to go. Except Reed is muted.
Jack.
There you go.
Yeah, no. I had the pleasure of watching the second half of the final with Jack, and I think all of us actually watched both legs, which is like not surprising for one of us, but sometimes tough for all three of us to do the same thing all at once. But yeah, a couple things that just sprang to mind, because this is, everyone's watched a little bit of Liga MX in their life, but the first time I've watched pretty much all of the Liga all the way through. And what really stood out to me was, well, first off, the goal confetti, as always. I'm a long-standing anti-goal confetti. Orlando does it. I think New York used to do it like back in the day. It's like, for me, that's the worst. It goes like, the list goes Joey Barton, then goal confetti, then Jack. So first, I would just like to kick it off. What are your thoughts on goal confetti?
Ooh. Yeah.
And then following that up, the thing that definitely takes, I think, the American audience is the home and away function of the final.
Mm-hmm.
And are you a big fan of that, or is that something that you're still apprehensive towards? Because I know a lot of what seems to be what feels like very long-standing traditions really are fairly recent, and a lot of people still are not totally sold on every function of the recent-ish structural change.
Well, as for the goal confetti, I'm a big fan. It's kind of, I'm not on the field myself, so I find it just to be highly entertaining just to see that. I do recognize why it could be an annoyance to a lot of fans. I do understand how it could be, especially like some of that stuff is a little shiny, and then you see the camera go by, and suddenly it's like it looks way too bright. So I can understand your perspective on the goal confetti. As for the home and away, format for Liga MX, and especially the playoffs, I'm a fan of that. The thing I'm not a fan of when it comes to the playoffs is the tiebreaker. Just a quick little recap of how Liga MX does the playoffs and how they do the tiebreakers. So in the quarterfinal and semifinal round, if the aggregate score is still level, then the first tiebreaker is away goals. The second tiebreaker after that is higher seeding. So I'm a fan of giving an opportunity for both teams to play at their own home venue. But when you get that tiebreaker where, let's say, number 1 seed plays against the number 8 seed, and then they lose by that away goal tiebreaker, to me, and I think you can argue for both sides, it feels a little unfair. That's the only thing that I disagree with Liga MX playoff format. But I'm a fan of the home and away format. And yeah, so the higher seed hosts the second leg, and the lower seed hosts the first leg. That's how it's usually done.
All right. Yeah, it was definitely a maybe not controversial, but definitely very entertaining last leg at Guadalajara. I think, the first thing that's going to spring to everyone's mind was it a penalty?
Oh, dude, that was definitely a penalty.
Oh, yeah. No, I shot straight back to 2014, that Robin dive in the quarterfinals. I was just like, I literally tweeted Airplane out just to see how many people were. It was crazy.
Well, I've heard a lot from Mexico fans. I heard a lot from Liga MX fans. There seems to be a consensus that it was a penalty. But what about you guys? I know you guys said that you did watch the match. Like, did you guys think it was a penalty? Oh my gosh. I want to hear your perspective.
He goes. So we're sitting there watching the match, and it was not as like, it didn't have as many fireworks as I was hoping it would, given what happened in the first leg with that epic comeback from Tigres. But he goes charging, they score in the 88th minute. Sosa gets that goal back, and then I'm like, oh, it's going to get really dicey. And the commentator on the Facebook live stream that they were doing in English goes, in true color commentator fashion, Tigres is going to have another chance to score here. And I was like, thank you for your awe-inspiring input. He goes charging into the box. Oh, my God. It was clear as day, and the referee had a clear line of sight. It was...
Yeah, no, I think... I'm going to just... give a little bit of background. I'd be lying if I were to say that I wasn't raised as a Chivas fan. I try to subdue and try to hinder those kinds of feelings. But even as someone who was raised as a Chivas fan, there is no doubt in my mind that was a penalty, a clear penalty.
This was a big win for Chivas, though. They had been winless in 9 or 11 seasons since they had last taken home a title. Do you think that this kind of, we see this a lot, kind of near and dear to my heart as an Arsenal fan, having struggled for long periods of time before, wrapping up a title. And then they go and take home the double this year. They also won the Mexican Cup too.
Correct.
What does that say about Chivas? Are they kind of back on the map? Should people be, really worried about them going forward at the start of next season?
I mean, I think you also have to recognize, you have to look back to the last year and the previous year where they were a team that was flirting with relegation. This is a team, and this would have been, I don't know, on the level of, let's say, I'm trying to think of just like American team standards, but just like if the Cowboys, if somehow like pro-rel existed in the NFL, it would have been similar to the Cowboys somehow being relegated. This is a team that was struggling for so long, and because of their popularity, because of what they represent in Mexico, this is an all-Mexican roster. There are a lot of people who are opposed and really support the idea of having an all-Mexican roster, but they just garner a huge amount of attention. So when they were on that cusp of becoming relegated, they were the butt of many jokes. I mean, they were just, everyone was constantly making fun of them, especially when you take a team that's that popular. So now they've had Matias Almeida, Argentine manager, who's taken charge, and he's really reawakened this team, and it's been a lot through his, not only just the signings that the club has made, but it's also just through the tactics, also through the playing style, which is a lot more attack friendly. It's a lot more aggressive. It's a lot more high pressing. So looking forward after this title, I think the key here for Chivas is if they're able to, hold on to a few of those key players, because a lot of those young Mexicans on this team, this is a very young roster, they have the potential to move abroad. They have the potential to go to Europe. A name like Orbelin Pineda can go abroad. You have someone like Rodolfo Pizarro who can also go abroad. And it's just not even just going abroad, but other teams within Liga MX might be, wanting to steal some of these players, these young Mexicans who have done quite well. So I think that's the key thing here, is if they can hold on to a couple of those key players. And also Almeida himself, who could potentially go to Europe. You never know. I think he's clearly has high goals. As much as Chivas means to him, he recently got a tattoo with a trophy on his arm earlier today. Yeah, it's all about maintaining Almeida or maintaining some of those key players.
And just to follow up with that, obviously it's cool. You see this in a few leagues around the world. Athletic Bilbao comes to mind in Spain, only posting or only using players from their region. What do you, just kind of on the other hand, what do you think of players like Gignac coming in from Europe, being French, and scoring 22 times in 22 games this season with Tigres? Do you think that Liga MX is going to be a league It comes to mind with MLS where they're drawing, more big name players both from overseas but also South America. Is that something that you think is going to really start to catch on, and players are going to come from overseas to Liga MX?
It does look like there is a trend with foreign talent coming into Liga MX, and I like that. I'm a big fan of that. I think it might pressure some of those Liga MX clubs to really, put a lot more money in their youth development. Certain clubs, I think a lot, actually not, I'm not going to say just certain, but like a lot of Liga MX clubs do have very good youth academies. But I think if you have someone like Gignac coming up, you have you look at that Tigres roster, you have a lot of foreign talent, which are just incredible. I've said that Tigres are, and they have some Mexican talent too, but I would say this is the closest that Liga MX can get to an all-star team when you look at that roster. But I like the idea of having that foreign talent come in and, just having those Liga MX clubs just reassess their current strategies, reassess what they want to do. And I think if they reassess, and I think if they put more money into those youth academies, then it'll benefit the Mexican game in general. So I'm a big fan of having Gignac come over. You had someone like Andy Delort, who actually he grew up kind of idolizing Gignac a little bit. I think he's 22 or 23. I might be wrong, but I know he's in his early 20s. Came over to Tigres because of Gignac, and he couldn't find a spot on this Tigres roster. He had to go back to France, but I'm hoping of more of that, is having those players who are able to take that risk and play in Mexico, and like I said, just bettering the league, just improving the league, and forcing those clubs to reassess their strategies.
Well, this is something that I kind of thought about too as a newcomer to Liga MX at a time where this change is taking place. Do you think there's a segment of fans? I'm thinking, so I'm in MLS a Vancouver Whitecaps fan and spend time thinking about elsewhere in North America, Canadian soccer. And there's a lot of Canadian fans who think it's almost an obligation for Canadian teams to sign and develop Canadian players at the expense of going to other countries and bringing in talent. So I guess kind of flip side of the same coin, do you think that there's a reasonable percentage of the fan base in Mexico that would be against kind of seeing more foreign talent come in? Yeah. Or is there kind of a consensus that it is good for the league, it is good to push these teams to do better in terms of youth academies and young Mexican talent?
I would say that my feelings are probably atypical for the way that I view foreigners coming to the league. I think there's a significant portion of the MX fans, whether they be Mexico or the United States, who follow the teams, who are perhaps uncomfortable with the amount of foreign talent that comes into Mexico. And I think a lot of that has to do with just there aren't those opportunities for Mexican players. That said, like I said, I still think that pressures a lot of those Mexican teams to, like I said, to produce more youth talent. I think it provides an incentive to say, like, if you want to reach this level, you have to be putting that money into youth academy. You have to. This is what we should be at. This is what we should be striving for. And I see this as a good thing, but I do think that it seems like the consensus is that most Liga MX fans, whether they be in the U.S. or Mexico, I'm not going to say that they're against it, but perhaps aren't exactly excited by the foreign talent that there is in Mexico.
Yeah, real quick. I think the general, but I'm sorry. Cesar, this won't sound as bad because guess who edits? Me. So everything's going to sound crisp and great. Just real quick, my perspective of this, because, I grew up in a relatively large area. It's a fairly, I don't know. We're going to try this one more time. This can be great.
No worries, man. Do your thing.
But the sentiment on this is more towards that Athletic Bilbao style that Jack was talking about. We're not quite dealing with, Zenit St. Petersburg fans who are just like xenophobic. It's more that larger sentiment of El Tre and then your club in Mexican fan culture. Correct or no?
It's kind of interesting. I feel like, and I've seen some people put out polls for that, where in the United States, you'll see a significant amount of Mexican-American fans who say that the priority is El Tri, then after that is your favorite Liga MX club. And that in Mexico, it seems like the priority is your favorite club, and then after that is El Tri. I think the takeaway here is maybe it has less to do with Mexico, more so to do with, I think Mexican-American fans have that stronger connection to El Tri, but that kind of makes sense when you think about it. When the Mexican flag right behind me, when it represents so much more than just a national team. It represents an identity. It represents you trying to be closer to your roots. But it is interesting to bring up, especially from a team like Chivas, where there are people who are hesitant to, and it's controversial, to hesitant to support Chivas because they feel as if for whatever reason it is xenophobic to have just only Mexicans within that club, and they do actually have Mexican Americans on that club, which is interesting to note, which they expanded to. Like you'll have a kid like, I think forgot his name, Zendejas, I think, who's from Texas, but he's now within the roster. So it is interesting to see that where you have that club like Chivas, and I think that I don't know it's tough to talk about just because, like I said, it's a very, very controversial topic, and I can see both sides where people are looking at an all Chivas roster and saying like, no, that's not how soccer should be about. You should invite everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're Mexican or Colombian. It doesn't matter if you have. It doesn't matter where you're at in the world. You should have an opportunity to play for that club. But at the same time, I can kind of understand, like I said, the Chivas perspective, where you see yourself as producing talent not just for your club but also for the national team. You'll have a lot of players within that Chivas club who are able to play for the national, get opportunities, and especially when they're winning titles like this, that's definitely not only just good for them but also for Mexico.
So I had one more question, and it's kind of unrelated, going back a bit, and then we can talk about the World Cup qualifiers coming up. But Jack mentioned the Facebook live stream. I actually watched on Univision, so I had no idea what the hell was going on the entire time. To the fun. We talked about this when we had you on the show the first time, but kind of looking back now and seeing they've tried the Facebook Live in English. If you don't know, Liga MX is experimenting with using Facebook Live English streams, which I enjoyed. It kind of was my entree to the league. Has been a success based off what you've seen. Do you think it's something the league will continue to use going forward? Or was it a one-shot deal? I'm not 100% sure on the structure of the...
Yeah, it looks like right now with the current setup, the current contract they have, it's supposed to go through the whole year. Okay. I don't think there's anything set for 2018, but it is supposed to go through the rest of 2017. I feel personally, I think it's a little too early to say whether it's a success or failure, because if this was any other league in the world, we would say, hold on, we're just at the halfway point, and I think we haven't really had enough time to really go out and see how many fans we can reach, how many fans we could interact with and engage with. Just because of the short tournament format of Mexico, it's just you have 2 tournaments within 1 year. So I don't think it's been given enough time. I think we have to be patient, but I think what they've done so far has been successful. I think we talked about this in the last show, where there are a lot of, Mexican Americans, Chicanos, Latinx like me who have this strong tie to not only our culture, but also to the Mexican national team, Liga MX. But because we're raised here in the U.S., we predominantly speak in English. And this is a minority group that continues to grow significantly. And because they're raised here in the U.S., they're going to continue to speak in English. That's just, that makes sense. That's just, and I think from a business perspective, it makes sense why Univision made this deal to be covering Liga MX in English. Because you see that with the numbers. I posted something, and I constantly post every week, just the ratings of Liga MX in the United States. It's by far the most popular soccer league here in the United States. And it's almost incredible the lack of coverage there is, whether it be on TV or whether it be written. I know that's probably not good for me, because then there could be more people like me. More competition within my own job, but there needs to be more coverage on this league, which, as I mentioned, every week it just dominates TV ratings, and it's not just one game, it's multiple games. So, but going back to sorry, rambling a little bit here, but I think going back to the Facebook Lives, I think we need to be a little patient. Like I said, I think due to the short tournament format, I feel like that we've reached the halfway point. And I think, and especially since that contract is supposed to go out until the end of 2017, I'll be interested to see what those numbers will look like by the end of the year.
Well, we're here to try and convert more faithful and
there you go.
And build up viewership amongst the gringo population.
There you go. Thank you.
I have fallen in love watching Liga MX, but my Spanish that I stopped doing freshman year of college has failed me, so I really appreciate the Facebook Live streams.
Yeah, there you go.
Looking ahead now to a couple of other tournaments that are going to be happening this summer, or well, not one tournament, also some World Cup qualifying for another really important tournament next summer. Looking ahead, big matches. I believe Mexico is away to Honduras for their first match, or they at home?
Actually, they're both home. Actually, they're both going to be in the Azteca next week.
Oh, so that's big. So I know that the players of El Tri have been arriving in Denver kind of over the last few days, getting ready for their training camp leading into this. What are your expectations from Mexico? They get two home games against probably their, some of their tougher competition in the Hex. What are your expectations from El Tri from these two matches against Honduras and then of course against the United States?
Yeah, I mean, before I answer this, I do have to quickly recognize that CONCACAF is a growing region. I think Mexico and the U.S. are, they're traditionally the two powerhouses within this region. But I think within the past few years, you're starting to see some of those teams slowly make their way up. Slowly, looking more like daunting rivals as opposed to, easy matches that you're just going to easily get 3 points from. But that said, I think that the priority here, especially in the Azteca, regardless of any CONCACAF opponent, Mexico should be getting 6 points. Mexico should be, especially when I think, man for man, Mexico is superior to Honduras and the United States. Who knows? It's CONCACAF, though. It's CONCACAF. I would be saying the same exact thing in the last World Cup qualifying round. And we saw what happened. We saw what happened with the national team. We saw that Mexico struggled, almost didn't make the World Cup, but it wasn't for the United States. Mexico wouldn't have been there. Mexico would not have made that World Cup were it not for the United States. But on paper, that is what Mexico should be striving for. And like I said, if it was an away match, that'd be a different conversation. But because it is at the Azteca, there is no, and for better or worse, that there is no excuse. They have to be getting those 6 points. And I see that they'd be taking one step closer towards a spot in the World Cup. But as I mentioned, just you never know with CONCACAF. And who knows? And I wouldn't be. I guess Mexico's going to get. They should get that win against Honduras, but I wouldn't be that surprised if they had a draw against the U.S.
They're going to get Christian Pulisic.
There you go. Yeah. No, I would love to have someone like a Pulisic in the Mexican national team roster. That'd be incredible. Yeah. No.
And then, of course, looking ahead, Confederations Cup 2017. They did. Mexico did beat the United States in that CONCACAF Cup playoff game. Oh God, was it 2015? It's been a while. It was kind of the beginning of the end for Jurgen Klinsmann. What should Mexican soccer fans, supporters of El Tri, be looking for from the team in a tournament like the Confederations Cup? A lot of the players with El Tri, of course, they play in MLS, so they some play overseas where they're going to be coming back. I believe that the Apertura will be starting up close to the tournament. What should Mexican fans be expecting of El Tri when they're off in Russia for the 8-team tournament this summer?
I think they should be expecting Mexico's best team. I think it's clear that Mexico's manager, Juan Carlos Osorio, has made it quite clear that the priority is the Confederations Cup. They have the Gold Cup the following month in July, and it looks like, and we're going to probably get that Gold Cup roster, more than likely, there are no confirmation, more than likely this Friday or Saturday, and it's looking like it's almost a near guarantee that Gold Cup roster is going to be a backup squad, a squad filled with, promising talent, maybe a few experienced players there who aren't capable of making it onto Mexico's first team. But it's clear that Confederations Cup, that should be Mexico's best. That should be Mexico trying its best to do well in this tournament, because I think this is something I think that Mexico fans also have to remind themselves of, is that we feel like such a powerhouse sometimes. We feel like, oh, we're such a good team, blah, 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 blah. But sometimes it feels like we're just a lot of the success that we've had is on the CONCACAF level. You could say the same thing for the U.S. men's national when they've won the Gold Cup and they've done quite well. It's on the CONCACAF level. Outside of CONCACAF, both Mexico and the United States struggle. They really, really struggle. You look at the titles outside of CONCACAF. There's nothing that we've really done to really make ourselves say that yes, we are a world powerhouse. Blah blah. The only thing that Mexico has done outside of CONCACAF is win that Confederations Cup title in 1999. Granted, that was a Confederations Cup title that was won in Mexico. Mexico hosted that tournament. So I think that's something to remember. So I think this is an opportunity, especially when Mexico has they have a lot of depth, especially in the attack right now. When they have such an impressive amount of depth in the roster, when they have and I know this might not be the most popular opinion within the Mexican soccer community. I think I love Osorio. I think he's a great coach, and I think he's a very intelligent coach. A coach who used to watch Liverpool train back in the day. I think that if Mexico really wants to, show that they are a team that is, one of the best in the world, then they should be using this as an opportunity. Are they going to win the Confederations Cup? I don't think so. I'm not going to say they're going to win the Confederations Cup. I think a spot in the semifinals would be ideal, and the final would be exciting. I can't see that, but I think the goal here and what I'm anticipating is that they sneak into the semifinal round, which is just the next round after the group stage.
Yeah. And then you talked about it. Of course, we do have the Gold Cup this summer, and you said it there. I think a lot of people are kind of expecting it, even if they don't follow Eltree too much. With the kind of putting, more of a second team out, what do you, and this is a player that might be, I don't know if you'll be able to speak about this, but Jesse Gonzalez with FC Dallas, of course, he's been terrific for them so far this season, both in the CONCACAF Champions League and in the MLS regular season. Is he somebody that you can see getting a call-up with Eltree to go to the Gold Cup to kind of try and prove himself to play with the full first team more often? I mean, he's 22. What do you think about that?
I liked it from what I've seen from Jesse. I like him. Obviously, his height is a big thing too. He's a tall guy. What he showed, I believe it was in the 2015 MLS playoffs. He did a beautiful job in net for FC Dallas. I think it was 2015. Yeah, it actually was 2015. But I don't think he'll get the call up. I think Mexico has I know that might be disappointing. I like the idea of him being there. Personally, I would, from those 3 goalkeeper spots, he would probably be in that roster for me, especially just because I want to see a transition of that goalkeeping talent. Because right now Mexico has a lot of decent / very good goalkeepers who are either in their late 20s or 30s. And I think Jesse right there is a part of the future for the national team. I would like to see that, but I'm doubtful. Maybe it wouldn't be that big of a shock if he did make it onto the roster, but I am still doubtful that he'll be on that roster. Although I would be a fan of him being there.
So kind of looking at some of the other guys, obviously the official roster has not dropped yet, but in your estimation, your expert estimation, who are some of the young players you think will be on that Gold Cup roster, and who do you think we should be looking out for potentially, because these guys may be the future stars that will be thoroughly whipping the U.S. in a few years' time?
Well, you never know. Pulisic is doing quite well. You never know. But I think that's actually a little bit of a tough question, because there are a lot of those players there's a lot of young players within the Mexican roster who could sneak into the Confederations Cup roster. So a couple of these guys that I'm going to name, they might find a way, might sneak into that backup role into the Confederations Cup. But my guess is that we'll see someone like an Orbelín Pineda. He's 21. I forget if he's 21 or 22. I'm pretty sure he's 21. Chivas midfielder. He was a key player for Chivas, not only just in Liguilla, but also during the regular season. He's just a very, very well-rounded midfielder, has a great shot, and he has, I think what is most exciting about him is his excellent work rate. So I think that is a player, and I'm not sure if he's going to make it into the Confederations Cup roster, but I think he'll be someone to watch out for in the Gold Cup. You also have someone like another midfielder. His name is Eric Gutierrez. He isn't nearly as attack-minded. He's a little bit more on the defensive midfielder side. That's also someone from who comes from Pachuca. And Pachuca in Mexican soccer, in the past few years, they've been seen as a club, an organization that's been producing a lot of exciting young talent. They're the ones who have produced someone like an Irving Lozano, like I said, like an Eric Gutierrez, also an Eric Aguirre. So and those 2 names that I mentioned too are some players that you might see in the Gold Cup. Although someone like Lozano, I think he's good enough to be going to the Confederations Cup. I think a big name. I think if there is one name who I'm most excited about, and he isn't a striker, he isn't a midfielder, not a goal. He's a defender. His name is Cesar Montes. He is a 19-year-old from Monterrey, and I think what I like most about him is just the confidence that he exudes into every match. It's just you assume that when you look at him, he's clearly a kid. He's like 19, but when you see the way that he presents himself on the field, you look like you're watching a veteran who's in his early 30s, and with every passing match that he goes through, he gains a significant amount of confidence. So I think that's someone that I would keep an eye on. Is Cesar Montes too, who is I believe just turned 19, if I remember correctly. He's either 18 or 19, but more than likely, because he hasn't been given the opportunity yet with the senior team, I think he's one of those names that you'll see in the Gold Cup roster.
I think we can transition onto talking about the World Cup bid coming up in a little bit, but just before we do that, to kind of wrap up the Mexican national team talk, what happened against that Croatia team? Oh my goodness,
that was ugly, wasn't it? Oh man,
I thought, like, when I saw that roster, we talked about it a little bit on Twitter. I was thinking, like, what are they doing playing this game? Like, it's gonna be like 7-0 at half.
Yeah, I was in LA for the game. I talked to a Croatian fan. And I was like, oh, because I was doing like a Periscope and I was walking around and I saw some guy and he was like, Croatia. I was like, oh, what are your thoughts on the game? Tell me what do you think is going to happen? He's like, no, this is our C team. This is our C team. We're going to lose 3-1. And there's some random Croatian Twitter account who just somehow found me. I have no idea how they found me, but they're just talking about, I was just like, this is an embarrassment to our country. I can't believe we're taking part in this game. Who are these people? Who are these players? Blah, blah. So it was very clear that this may not have even been the C team. I think what happened for Mexico is that Osorio was trying out a lot of different options. This is a team that they didn't have the longest time to train together, to find that cohesion before the match. And honestly, as much as I want to say this is a failure from Mexico's part, which is it was a massive failure, I mean, it's a friendly, so it's okay. We can glance over it. I can laugh about it. But I think we also, no one's giving credit to these unknown Croatian players. I mean, it's just they did a fantastic job. They were incredible to how their effectiveness, like in front of net, their organization too. Just especially in that second half, to be holding off all that Mexican talent. I think, at least from my perspective, obviously there's a huge focus on Mexico failing, Mexico doing badly. Yeah. Mexico did not do well. Who knows what would have happened if those second half subs, because remember, this is a Mexico team that played with a lot of backup options in that first half. Who knows what would have happened if they would have had those starters in the first half? But I think we need to give credit to that Croatian side. And this is so telling of that Croatian side when I can't name a single player because I didn't know who any of them were. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know who any of those guys were. I asked fellow journalists in that press box of the LA Coliseum. No one knew who these players were, but you have to give these guys credit. And it was really cool to see, even like I said, even though I am myself a Mexican national team fan, I have the flag behind me. It was very, very cool to see. I want to say it was about 2,000 to 3,000 Croatian fans who showed up at the stadium. And as that match ended, it was clear that the win was not only just important for those fans, but the players who went up and they clapped at the fans clapped back at them. So I thought that was very, very cool to see. I thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah, that's definitely. Oh yeah, because I saw the shots on Twitter of that. It was a great, as Jack would say, scenes. After United beat that very talented young Ajax side, my biggest takeaway was that it was not a poor Ajax side and it wasn't a particularly great United side. But the most interesting talking point from that was how will that single match, how will that final loss shape these very talented young players, and how will that perhaps spurt them on, and is that going to be an 18 that we can look back on in a couple years and say, man, the places you'll go. It's going to be interesting to see some of these very much so fringe up and comers from that hyper talented Croatia. If in a couple years people look back and say, oh, he got his big break playing against Mexico. Yeah,
and especially, I don't know. Clearly you can't make huge assumptions. I'm not going to run a mile with an inch of information here. And I forget the name of the goalkeeper. Once again, just so telling about this Croatian side. I forget who that goalkeeper was, but he was fantastic. I thought he was incredible. I thought he had a beautiful game in net. So, yeah, but like you said, it is going to be interesting to see, like, that Croatian side, a lot of that backup roster. And there's not a single person, like I said, not even that Croatian fan, decked out. He had the hat and he had, like, the face paint and whatnot, and he told me that they're going to lose 3-1. Like, not even that guy thought that there's even going to be a chance for a draw there, so.
Hey, he gave him a goal at least.
Yeah, he gave him a goal. Yeah, there you go. he had a little bit of faith in them. He had a little bit of faith.
Looking forward, it's a big opportunity for all of North America, really. Oh, okay. Well, I won't say all. For the three largest nations in North America. Of course, the World Cup qualifying bid. It's for the tournament where they will be switching to the new format, adding the extra teams in, the triple bid between Mexico, the United States, Canada. This is kind of this was like a big deal when it was announced. So I guess first, do you think that this group, the three of them, should be the favorites to get that World Cup?
I mean, it seems like they're the clear favorites, aren't they? You haven't really heard much news about any other bids, and if you have, I think that would be a very, very, very small chance of them winning, and especially since, you look at when the U.S. hosted in 1994. One thing that you constantly hear, that you incessantly hear about when U.S. hosted, was just how financially successful it was. How not even just financially successful, how massive it was, not only just for the U.S. but for the actual World Cup, just because you have these huge NFL college football stadiums that can house all those fans, and that FIFA all they see are dollar signs. When they see the capacity of those stadiums, they must see a huge amount of dollar signs there. But I mean, it was definitely an interesting. I want to hear what you guys before I say anything. I want to hear what you guys have to say about that. But I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that, the proposal. There's nothing concrete about this, but the proposal.
Personally, I'm very much in favor of it. I think it's always fun, and these tournaments generally are quite successful. When it is a joint bid, it's kind of a good way to keep each other honest in a lot of ways. I think of Korea and Japan in the World Cup; they did a good job. I think of the Poland-Ukraine Euros; did a very good job. I'm very much in favor of it. I think it would be a huge success, not only for the United States as they get to host 60 of the 80 games, but also for Mexico, of course, a storied soccer nation. But I think that this is the biggest success, and if they get this bid, it'll be most impactful for a team like Canada and for a country like Canada as a footballing country, because they will bring in a lot of national teams are going to be looking for places to set up camp. Canada is very, very beautiful over the summer, and they're going to be building these high-tech footballing, practice facilities and leaving them there. We saw it happen in Brazil. I think this would be very, very positive. For Mexico and the United States for obvious reasons, but I think it would have the biggest impact for Canada. And I think that would be a positive thing for them. Also, it would just be so fun. Like, I know it's still so far away, but to have the World Cup back on American soil, to be able to see it go in person, it would be unreal.
I echo all of that. As an American, I'm very excited about it for obvious reasons. I will say, though, it bothers me a little as someone who's not a very totally rah-rah jingoistic American. The inequality within the bid in terms of where the sites are, it's very clearly slanted towards the U.S. Soccer Federation. And I was kind of wondering your thoughts on this. What are the perceptions within Mexico, within the Mexican Football Federation? Do they feel like they kind of, obviously they all negotiated, but that there is this inequality? Because clearly in terms of how many venues and the fact that the finals and semifinals will all be on American soil, final even at the Azteca, you don't have a semifinal at BC Place in Canada. There is kind of this awareness that there are these disparities, or is it just it's going to be a gravy train? It's going to mint money. Are they okay with not having a semifinal necessarily if it makes them this?
I think the FMF is more than okay with this. I think the FMF's like, sure, sweet, let's make a good deal of money off this ourselves, and just like, this will be great, this will be fantastic. I think that it's really difficult to run into very many fans of the Mexican national team, whether they be in Mexico or the U.S., who are happy with this bid. Like if I'm being honest, I was also a little. I think the problem here is that because of the hype for those who have been following this rumor of this triple bid. There was a lot of hype, but there were no details about it's going to be. They're going to have 60 games over here, 10 games over there. It was going to be a triple bid, and it was just a lot of excitement. And I think even a lot of Mexico fans recognized that the U.S. was going to have a majority of these games. I think after all that hype and all that excitement, it was definitely a letdown to recognize that Mexico would only have 10 games. And even that in itself, I think, wasn't that bad. I think which was, I don't know if insulting is the right word here, but maybe just confusing is just that no games from the quarterfinal round afterwards would be in Mexico. Or even, let's just say even just at least one for Canada. I think that if it is going to be a triple bid here, that there is at least one game within that quarterfinal, semifinal. I'm not saying that championship, that the final game or even the third place game has to be in Mexico or in Canada, but at least one of those games within the quarterfinals or the semifinals would be there. But I think something that's interesting to note, though, is I had one of my buddies, Tom Marshall, who he interviewed the president of Santos Laguna. I'm getting into something here when I said the president of Santos Laguna. He interviewed the president of Santos Laguna earlier this year, and when he was chatting with the president of Santos Laguna, the president said that there is a soccer business summit. I want to say it was either last year or earlier this year. Actually, I want to say it was last year, where U.S. Soccer made a statement saying that, well, we're going to host the 2026 World Cup with or without anyone's help. But we're going to do that. And that it was actually the FMF who actually piped up and said, like, ooh, like, can we help out? The FMF was just like stepped out and said, like, we would like to be a part of this. And that according to that Santos Laguna president, that the U.S. Soccer was, in his words, they were negative. It was a negative reaction when Mexico wanted to take part in this. So I think when you take that into consideration, maybe Mexico, like, as much as I'm bothered with the fact that Mexico is potentially, remember that nothing's set in stone, but that Mexico is potentially only going to host 10 games, maybe that is actually somewhat of a win when you consider that the U.S. Soccer could have not only just at first they were hesitant about working, at least according to the Santos Laguna president, they're first hesitant about working with Mexico, but the U.S. could actually host the World Cup by itself. So I think that's important to keep in mind. At the same time, I do understand why fans are bothered with just those 10 games, which just seems like such a, it almost feels like a slap in the face a little bit. If it's supposed to be a three-country bid. But I think that's interesting to note. I think the fact that it seems like Mexico had to squeeze its way in there. And I don't know how Canada made its way in there, but I think that's interesting to note.
No idea. I mean, for Mexico, in a lot of ways, this is, I mean, for Canada, too, it is going to be a big victory because the amount of money that they're going to make on these 10 games to only have to put up X amount for the bid is like probably going to be pretty huge for them.
Yeah, of course. The true winners here, the Confederate, like U.S. Soccer, Canadian Soccer Federation, same with the FMF. They're very happy, very, very. But I think when you ask the fans, those are the ones who are a little bit more bothered. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Canada's just happy to be relevant in the football world for once.
Yeah, we could say whatever we want about the Canadian Football Federation at this point. They'd just be happy to be included. You know, thanks for mentioning us. Yeah.
Canadian soccer fan at the time, I'm offended.
Canada is like the kid that's completely content with getting the participation trophy at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Cesar, that is all that we have for you for today. We thank you very much for coming back on the pod.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Of course, you do. Have a mean Twitter game about you. So where can they find you on social media or anywhere else that people can track you down?
It's just mostly Twitter. I should expand more. I've been slacking on Facebook. My Instagram account is boring. I don't do any Snapchat. Oh man, it's awful. But most of my work is just if you want to find me like social media wise, it is just mostly on Twitter. It's just at Cesar H Football, so at CESARHFUTBOL. Other than that, you can just find me constantly. I mean, it's an incessant amount of work, but I enjoy it, so I'm just never going to stop. But I'm just either with the Mexican Soccer Show, with FootMex Nation, 442, ESPN, Soccer Nation, sometimes Vice. Sometimes I've helped out with. I'm kind of everywhere, but whoever's willing to let me talk about soccer and my weird ramblings about and thoughts about the sport.
Well, we really do appreciate you taking time to come and talk to us when you are
Yeah, of course.
when you work with such esteemed places all across the interwebs. That's all that we have for today, though, guys. Thank you all very much for joining the show. Let us know your thoughts on Twitter at @PointToTheSpot. We want to hear your thoughts about Mexican football, about the Clausura, about the World Cup, about the World Cup qualifiers, whatever you got. Until next time, though, take care.
Wait, hold on. No, I have a quick correction. Jack, this is a juggernaut, okay? You do not say thank you for muddying your crystal clear ESPN waters with us, okay? Like,
Dude, I think
this is a juggernaut. It will not stop. One day ESPN are going to be knocking down our door.
Hey, Cesar, when 2026 rolls around and we have the World Cup,
Yeah.
potentially, would you be willing to come back and preview it with us?
I'll think about it. I gotta look at my schedule for 2026. I think my buddy is coming in town for the weekend, and I think we're supposed to head out or something. We'll look into it, though. We'll look into it.
26.
2026.
Nuclear war may go down.
Yeah, who knows what'll happen by then?
In 2026. Oh my God. Trying to think about my life 9 years from now is scary.
That's why I just
Okay.
don't do it.
I don't like it.
Okay.
You'll be